Tonight, News 5 is back in East Palestine 6 months after a train derailment rattled the village.
Why does it smell bad? Why does my throat hurt? You know, the water smells funny. Fish are dying.
When the networks left,
Do you feel safe here?
No.
we stayed and continued to follow through for you.
Would you want to live here, dude?
Tonight, we learn how neighbors are doing.
I still feel in my heart that my home's not safe to return to.
How are things for you?
I would like to say that they are improved, but I can't wholeheartedly say that.
And I talked to East Palestine's mayor about how to get his community back on track.
We're doing a lot better than we were.
And take a closer look at why people are hopeful about East Palestine's future and Norfolk Southern's promises to turn things around. Good evening, I'm Delon Dillard, back here at East Palestine, where 6 months ago this week, life changed for the foreseeable future. News 5 has been back here. We have returned to this village multiple times since that train derailed on February 3rd, monitoring the cleanup at the derailment site and speaking with residents as well as officials about the challenges they are facing every single day. Some families are still living here day by day with their futures in limbo. Bringing in my colleague, News 5 investigator Tara Morgan, you have been here as well, speaking with families, and really the overarching theme you're hearing is uncertainty.
Right, and they still feel that 6 months later. One woman is actually contemplating selling her home, but that means leaving behind everything she has worked for. Another woman just doesn't want to keep relocating with her elderly parents. Both of them just want solid answers so they can make plans again.
Thank you so much for covering this and for being there since day one.
Christina Ferguson is living in a rental about 10 miles away from her childhood home. So you feel East Palestine is still a danger?
Yes, very much.
Christina first spoke with me on a cold and damp February afternoon. The EPA administrator was about to step through her front door on East Rebecca Street. What do you think about when you look back?
It still doesn't seem real.
Christina says she feels blessed having her family together, not in a hotel, but in a home. Her stepfather has dementia and now knows this house.
It's a beautiful home. It is. It's just not my home.
She believes her elderly mother's home in East Palestine can't be saved.
It's not fit for anyone to live in. I know that in my heart. I couldn't sell that to someone. I couldn't live with myself if someone got sick.
Christina isn't the only one living in limbo. So good to see you again.
Yeah, you too, Tara.
Yeah.
Thanks so much
Sure.
for everything.
We met Linda Murphy days after the train disaster. Linda was the first to bring up concern about well water.
I was told I needed to find a hydrogeologist.
Her home is a quarter mile from Leslie Run, which was contaminated by the derailment. Her well is 40 feet below the creek level.
What I'm trying to get the answer to is, okay, how does the water table sit? How does it flow? And is that a risk to us here?
Every 2 weeks, Linda and her husband truck water in for their horses.
It's a process, takes us sometimes hours to do that, where before I just turned on the tap.
Linda says her well has been tested 3 times with different results.
You just can't help but feel that the people that we're leaning on don't have the knowledge base to pull information and to pull answers from. Look at you. You're a mess.
It's not just about water with her horses.
Also just eating the grass, eating the pasture. There's dioxins on that. We've got independent testing that shows it at high levels.
Christina says people in East Palestine deserve closure. For her family, that means being grounded in a home of their own.
I want to know so I can start to heal and make plans again and know if I'm going to be putting up a Christmas tree and look forward to things.
Christina is waiting for final findings on her home. She expects to hear from Norfolk Southern by September.
And obviously, we have talked to so many people who live here. Many of them have shared their health concerns. What about the women you talked to?
They still feel some health concerns, some symptoms, the new ones that have even popped up. For Linda, she says she's had hearing and vision loss she's trying to get answers for. And Christina says she's reached out to an expert out of state for health testing.
Okay, so let's take a step back for a second. A lot has transpired here in the past 6 months to get us where we are today.
Right, and News 5 has returned to East Palestine frequently for surveys to try to get a feel for the frustrations.
Around 9 p.m. on February 3rd, a Norfolk Southern train carrying hazardous materials derailed, sending toxic chemicals into the air, soil, and creeks. 2 days later, nearby homes and businesses were ordered to evacuate due to fears of potential explosions.
It's a dangerous situation. That's why the evacuation notice is still in place 1 mile around the scene. It's still a very volatile situation. It could turn in an instant, so please just stay out of town.
On February 6th, saying it was the only way to prevent an explosion, authorities began a controlled release and burn of the vinyl chloride inside 5 derailed tanker cars. The large plume of black smoke could be seen billowing into the sky.
February 8th, the mandatory evacuation order was lifted after air and water samples were deemed safe. 2 weeks later, the National Transportation Safety Board released its preliminary findings from the investigation into the train derailment, noting surveillance video showing a wheel bearing on one of the rail cars overheating. The NTSB chair said the derailment was no accident.
The question is, what gives me the certainty that this was 100% preventable?
On March 6th, Norfolk Southern announces a new 6-point safety plan aimed at improving wheel-bearing technology. 3 days later, Norfolk Southern CEO Alan Shaw testified before Congress about the train derailment in East Palestine and promised to help the community recover.
I want to begin today by expressing how deeply sorry I am for the impact this derailment has had on the residents of East Palestine. I am determined to make this right.
In late June, the NTSB held a 2-day investigative hearing about the response to the train derailment. First responders detailed the chaos at the scene and expressed concern about ingesting toxic fumes.
I'm concerned about not only my responders, but everybody around for long-term health concerns. Hopefully we don't find anything. Unfortunately, we probably will have some that will.
The NTSB's investigation into the derailment is expected to take more than 1 year to complete.
Then, on July 3rd, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine asked President Biden to declare East Palestine a major disaster area. The move would allow the federal government to help pay for the cleanup costs if Norfolk Southern backs out. No decision has been made yet. DeLon and I and a team with the News 5 investigators asked East Palestine residents whether they were satisfied with Norfolk Southern's response to the train derailment. 2 months after the disaster, almost 72% of people surveyed said they were somewhat or very dissatisfied. 6 months later, some people's attitudes softened, with nearly 56% saying they were somewhat or very dissatisfied.
Yeah, and I asked the mayor that same question when I sat down with him one-on-one. This was actually our first time sitting down for an interview. The only time that we have heard from the mayor is during news conferences. He told me one-on-one, he said, look, this is really my commitment to serving the residents here in East Palestine. Running for office to lead a town of roughly 4,700 people, I would really doubt navigating a major disaster would be on your bingo card.
I never thought I'd be on national television or, in a mob of reporters in our gymnasium.
But this quaint town was derailed, something none of them asked for, especially the town's mayor, Trent Conaway. 6 months later, he says things are getting back on track.
Some people may not know, you are a part-time mayor. You still have a full-time job.
Yeah.
How has this weighed on you mentally?
At first, it was very hard. It was hard to struggle both. And then, having 2 kids and a wife too. But, I've got through it, and, we're doing a lot better than we were.
As of now, Conaway says he is satisfied with the progress that Norfolk Southern is making to right its wrongs.
Yes. I think it could have been avoided, but also I feel it was an accident. I don't know if anybody is 100% to blame for this.
You may also recall Mayor Conaway was loudly critical of President Biden. Biden visited Ukraine back on President's Day, which Conaway called a slap in the face. Still, the president has not visited East Palestine, but said back in March that he planned to visit sometime in the future.
I think a visit from him might help get some of the stigmatism that we have as a village, that, we're polluted. There's people who don't want to come visit our village from out of town. There's local youth athletic programs that won't bring their kids into our town, and it's just not fair to our residents to have that stigmatism around them.
Conaway says his love for East Palestine is what keeps him going.
I know there are so many people who After dealing with all of this, especially in these past 6 months, may not choose to be mayor again. Why are you going to run again?
I owe it to the citizens, and now that I have to finish what we started, I have to make sure that the citizens are taken care of.
Many renters in the area have up and left and have not returned since the derailment happened. In fact, I talked to the mayor. He told me about 200 residents are still displaced yet and still today.
And for the last 6 months, landlords tell us they feel like they've been forced to pay renters' bills without that rent income. News 5's Bryn Caswell shows us how East Palestine landlords feel lost on how to move forward.
East Palestine's slogan is where you want to be. But since the February 3rd train derailment, that's far from the truth for about 200 families.
That's a quaint little town, I mean, it used to be booming and stuff, but like all small towns are kind of, industry moves out, kind of gone by the wayside, and then this happens.
Landlord William Foster has rented one of his duplexes for decades, since he purchased it back in 1988. It sits on East Haggart Street, 800 feet from the derailment.
I could see the fire, and I could see the black plume of smoke going up.
Since the mandated mass evacuation during the controlled burn, 2 of Foster's tenants left and haven't returned.
This was kind of going to be like part of my retirement.
Another landlord, Gary Allison, whose 7 properties back up to the highly contaminated Sulphur Run, tells me he has lost tens of thousands of dollars ever since the train derailment due to missing tenants.
When 3 of the tenants moved out, they leave all their trash, they take what they want, they stick you with water bills, and it goes on and on.
So far, he's not having any luck finding new tenants.
You tell them when it's in East Palestine, Ohio, they hang up on you. I'm the one that, that's holding the mortgage paper, the insurance, everything just to keep it afloat.
Foster can't decide what to do with his property moving forward.
I got to do some work on the bathrooms and stuff like, fix it up, but is it going to pay? Am I going to spend all this money and then I ain't going to be able to rent it out?
Allison is interested in Norfolk Southern's program that is supposed to compensate homeowners for depreciated properties, announced in May. He says in a recent appraisal done by his bank, his property depreciated nearly $200,000 since February 3rd. Foster is more skeptical about the program and feels more attention needs to be focused on testing.
What I'm concerned with is the soil. Right after that happened, they cleared all that stuff and had it right behind my house. I'm like 800 feet away. Do something for me.
What's your concern with renting it out to new tenants?
The chemicals. Am I going to have them sign a release that if something happens, I can't be held responsible? So I'm like, is it worth it?
In East Palestine, Bryn Caswell, News 5.
And still ahead tonight, News 5 is following through, checking in with residents impacted by the train derailment.
The people here in this town did not deserve this. They just did not deserve this.
I revisit a man who lives near the crash site to see what's changed over the last 6 months.
And you may remember seeing this video of Ohio Governor Mike DeWine drinking tap water in East Palestine. During our surveys, News 5 investigators asked residents about the safety of their drinking water. The latest results show the majority of people are still afraid to drink their tap water, but fewer people are reporting concerns.
Pearl.
Welcome back. So News 5 is dedicated to following through on the stories that mean the most to you. That is why we have returned here to East Palestine time and time again. Days after that derailment, I actually met a man who lives just feet away from the crash site. Here's what he told me back then.
Do you feel safe here?
No, I don't. No. Would you want to live here, dude? I mean, you know what I mean? It's bad, man.
6 months later, I revisited Frank McCracken and asked him if his mind has changed. It's tough to wrap your mind around losing your sense of normalcy in an instant.
Me being this close, I guess I've had to just grow with it and deal with it.
But the reality is, residing in abnormalcy is Frank McCracken's reality.
Number one, peace of mind. That's all I want. I just want to get on with my life. It's like everyone else here.
6 months later, and McCracken, who lives a stone's throw away from the derailment site, showed me a few things that have changed since the last time I saw him back in February. So all of this is new. This was not here 6 months ago.
This has been here. They just put this up about a week or two ago. I had noticed that.
And all of this was green space.
Yeah, it was all grass.
They say the only constant in life is change, but constantly, McCracken still finds himself worried about the same thing, and it hasn't changed since February 3rd.
I remember the first time I met you, when I interviewed you, I asked you, do you feel comfortable living here? You told me no. Has that changed?
No, it's still the same. I don't feel comfortable being here.
That level of uncomfortability is much more exacerbated for Nicole Chestnut, who had just moved to East Palestine barely 48 hours before the derailment.
So everything I had moved in, all of my kids' clothes, just everything was the smell was terrible.
6 months later, does she regret moving to East Palestine?
I would say that I regretted it then because of just the train derailments. But as for East Palestine in a whole, I don't regret moving here. It's a lovely town, and the people deserve a lot better.
McCracken and Chestnut both say they are a bit more confident in Norfolk Southern's commitment to make things right because they see them working every day. But that zeal for the town of East Palestine that you heard Chestnut reference is really what's keeping most people going.
I'd like the whole world to know that this town has gone through hell.
And why some say they believe they'll make it through this.
They're going to come back strong. You see signs around here that says EP strong. Well, these people mean this.
So it's stories really like Frank's, for example, that really stuck with me even all the way back to February. Now here we are 6 months later. I really felt like it was important that we go back and talk to him again just to see how he's doing, and obviously his perspective today is just a bit different than it was 6 months ago.
Right. I feel the same way with the people that I met way back at the very beginning. They are so grateful that we are still here, and even people on the street have been saying thank you for standing by. The East Palestine fire chief expressed gratitude for his volunteer firefighters and the hundreds of crews that came from 3 different states. Chief Keith Drabick says they worked as one team. But 6 months later, he wants this disaster to foster change in the fire service as a whole.
Nobody's ever ready for anything like this.
Chief Drabick is about to submit his safety recommendations to the NTSB. In May, Chief Drabick told me communication was a big frustration during the derailment and chemical burn. Communication is one of the 4 things he'd like to see improved, and not just for first responders, but between the railroad and fire crews. He wants a regional communications center with a regional frequency for all departments to operate on. The East Palestine Fire Department is volunteer. Chief Drabick says paid staffing should also be a priority, along with training that can be easily accessible and more affordable for smaller departments. Your thoughts looking back?
Progress. It's slow but progress. The town is slowly starting to recover. There's still a lot of uncertainty, still a lot of unknowns, but I think progress. We're slowly getting there.
The push for stronger rail safety standards intensified after the toxic train derailment in East Palestine. The incident even brought Ohio's 2 senators together with the creation of the Bipartisan Railway Safety Act. We're taking a look at the legislation moving through Congress and the roadblocks still ahead.
As legislators work to find ways to prevent future derailments, doctors are working to find ways to help people whose health was affected by this one. A permanent health clinic opened in East Palestine in April, providing medical and other support to residents. Many people have complained of headaches, rashes, and breathing trouble.
The train derailment not only impacted residents' physical health, but their mental health too. According to a survey conducted by News 5 investigators, 61% of respondents said their mental health was affected 2 months after the derailment. 6 months later, 51% reported mental health issues related to the disaster.
Forever.
The toxic train derailment here in East Palestine sparked calls for tougher railroad safety standards, and Norfolk Southern, for example, has already changed some of its policies to highlight safety. Scripps News congressional correspondent Stephanie Lieberger reports on the federal push for tougher standards.
6 months after the derailment in East Palestine, there is bipartisan agreement here on Capitol Hill about the need for tougher federal laws, even as the NTSB investigation continues.
I'm committed to do what's right.
The CEO of Norfolk Southern, Alan Shaw, has faced Congress multiple times since the derailment in East Palestine 6 months ago, each time peppered with questions about his company's safety record.
They have cut costs in every conceivable way on safety.
Lawmakers demanded Norfolk Southern change its compensation strategy, which paid out millions in cash to executives for taking cost-cutting actions, like making trains longer and, critics argue, less safe. That revelation came in an exclusive series of Scripps News investigative reports. Under pressure, Norfolk Southern caved, telling Scripps News executive compensation will now be based in part on safety-related metrics.
This is a great credit to you and your investigation that we know about this now, and we're going to be zeroing in on this much more closely.
Congress is considering the Railway Safety Act. It would require two-person crews on trains, set new mandates on train length, increase penalties for violating safety standards, funds new hazmat training for first responders, and requires new trackside detectors to quickly identify failures on rail cars.
It was the combination of the hot axle and the plastic pellets which started the initial fire.
The NTSB's preliminary investigation found the most likely cause of the East Palestine derailment was an overheated bearing on a rail car. The complete NTSB report is expected no earlier than next year. Norfolk Southern accuses the owner of the rail car of improper maintenance. But that company, GATX, is pushing back, saying in part, "We will vigorously defend the company against baseless claims made by Norfolk Southern."
As Congress considers those new federal rules, more than a dozen states, including Ohio, are considering passing their own tougher standards. But that's a battle that may end up in court. The railroad industry insists that federal law trumps state law. Stephanie Liebergen, Scripps News, Washington.
So as Stephanie mentioned, Ohio is working on its own regulations. In March, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signed a $13.5 billion state transportation budget, which included new rail safety measures. One of those measures mandates a two-person crew for freight trains. This went into effect back on July 1st. But the Association of American Railroads is challenging the provision in court, saying Ohio lacks the authority to impose a two-person minimum. No decision has been made on this one yet. Meantime, the transportation budget also increases fines and the amount of rail car inspections for trains in Ohio. News 5 is committed to following through in East Palestine.
We want to keep telling the stories you care about. Email us at tips@wews.com and put follow through in the subject line.
Thanks for watching.